All right, so digestive system. First of all, we'll look up here at the mouth. You chew, mechanical digestion with your teeth and tongue. Swallow, it goes down the pharynx first, the throat, and then down the esophagus, which is in back of or dorsal to the trachea and the larynx. We can see the esophagus right here, and right next to it is the aorta. See, the trachea split here, so now we can see the esophagus that was behind it. Esophagus goes down past the diaphragm. Largest internal organ of the body is your liver. Liver in the digestive tract, its function is to make bile. Bile is stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. Bile emulsifies fats, which means it liquefies fats. It's not an enzyme. Bile will go down through the bile duct, and we'll get to that in a minute. Right here by your diaphragm is the cardiac sphincter. That will open up to allow food to go into your stomach. Sometimes people get a hiatal hernia because sometimes the cardiac sphincter protrudes up above the diaphragm, because the diaphragm actually helps close it. And if it doesn't completely close, then you have acid shooting up the esophagus, causing heartburn. Your stomach holds 2 to 4 quarts of liquefied food. Inside is hydrochloric acid, which helps to liquefy that food, and an enzyme called pepsin. Pepsin breaks down proteins. It's in the gastric glands, secreted by the gastric glands. In your mouth, you had amylase. As I forgot to point out, you have 3 pairs of salivary glands. Here, parotid, you just have to know salivary glands, but the parotid, submaxillary, sublingual. Those secrete 1 to 2 liters of saliva every day to moisten your food, make it easier to swallow, and amylase is the enzyme to break down starch. Starch is a huge carbohydrate. We got to get it into monosaccharides. Proteins are big. The pepsin in here is going to break them into amino acids so they can be absorbed. At the lower end of the stomach is another sphincter muscle, and that's called the pyloric sphincter. Now your stomach has 3 layers of muscles that are churning that food. That's still peristalsis, and they're mixing that food and churning it. So when you hear your stomach growling, it's growling because it's empty, and you're hearing the echo as it churns. The pyloric sphincter here pushes the food into the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. Here's your pancreas. Pancreas secretes all kinds of digestive enzymes. The 3 you need to know are amylase, lipase, and trypsins, or it's a protease, break down proteins. Meanwhile, bile is coming in here through the bile duct. They go into the duodenum, where they will, of course, help to break down food. They break down fats into fatty acids, carbohydrates, starches into monosaccharides, and proteins into amino acids. And also nucleic acids get broken down too into nucleotides. So we go into the small intestine. Here's your small intestine. Now your entire digestive tract is about 30 feet long. Your small intestine, if you stretch it out, it's about 21 feet long. In the body, we don't have that room. That's why it's all this convoluted. And not everybody's is picture perfect like this either. Some of them are balled up even tighter over on one side, depending if you're short. If we look at your stomach here, most people's stomach is what we call a J-shaped stomach. But if you're short like me, then it becomes a C-shaped stomach. It goes like that. So everything's got to try to fit in there. Your small intestine's job is to finish digestion, break everything down in the smallest form. It'll take sucrose and make it into glucose and fructose. Every carbohydrate has to be a monosaccharide. Every lipid or fat has to be a fatty acid, and every protein has to be an amino acid to be absorbed by the small intestine. Now the small intestine then will absorb those nutrients. And then whatever it couldn't digest will pass through a valve here called the ileocecal valve into the cecum. Your appendix hangs off the cecum. And then go through the large intestine. And as it travels through the large's primary job is to reabsorb water from undigestible material. Anything you couldn't digest should end up in your large intestine. We also have bacteria in here, good and bad. And one of the bacteria species makes vitamin K for us, would clot your blood. The other makes vitamin B12, and that helps to make healthy red blood cells. And then whatever you couldn't digest eventually will end up in the rectum, down here, and then pass out the anus. And we'll talk more in lecture about a little more about the rectum and stuff. But that's your digestive system.